Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel, and today we are talking about today's announcement of NRG officially signing their new roster. Welcoming on the team Demon1, Ethan, and Marved. They all officially joined. These players were rumored to be going to NRG throughout most of the offseason. Demon1 and Ethan probably would have stayed on Evil Geniuses if it wasn't for the pay cut that reportedly was coming to them if they had stayed on the roster. So the players were in contract jail. That's why they weren't able to join NRG earlier. Evil Geniuses made it very difficult for other teams to pick them up, but somehow, some way it worked out, and now they are officially on the NRG VCT roster going into the 2024 season. So now the question remains, is this roster better than the one they had last year? Is this roster a championship contender? Will this win a world championship? We're going to talk about it. First off, talking about Ethan, this is his second time on NRG. Third time if you count his stint on the team during his CSGO days, but I'm mainly talking about Valorant, so in my view, this is his second time, which is kind of why I'm surprised that he was picked up by this team. While the org is familiar with him and he's familiar with the org, and clearly he does see this org in a good light, otherwise why would he join them so many times? But at the same time, I feel like the last roster with Ethan on this team, I think he was the IGL during that roster as well. He didn't really have a ton of success on that roster now. This roster is much better than that roster during the 2022 season. NRG didn't qualify for any international tournaments with that roster before they got the Optic Core. Last year, they had a pretty good season overall, but they definitely didn't reach expectations. When NRG picked up the Optic Core before the start of the 2023 season, they were hoping for similar results to what that core has done before, which is winning tournaments and going to grand finals. Now, they did have some decent placements here and there, but overall, they did fall short of expectations, and the org opted for a rebuild. And with the opportunity to get two players from the most recent World Championship winning team, I do think it was a pretty good decision to pick up both of these players, but I am mildly surprised at this roster's construction, and I do think there are some concerns. Now, there has been a good amount of hype about this team on Twitter when this announcement was made, but there also has been a lot of skepticism, and that is mainly because of the fact that this team doesn't really seem to have a clear IGL. It appears like it's going to be Ethan as this team's IGL. Marved also has experience IGLing. He did it on FaZe, and then most recently he did it on Sentinels last year. That team didn't really have a good run. I think Marved did play pretty well, and he did the best he could with the situation he was in, but Marved is not built to be an IGL. He can do it, but I don't think he's an elite IGL, and I think having an elite IGL is very important in Valorant. It is debatable how important a very good IGL is, but if you look at the World Championship winning teams from the last couple years, most of them have had very strong IGLing during those runs. So while Ethan is a very experienced player, he's been around in esports for quite a long time at this point. He has IGLing experience on both 100 Thieves and NRG when he was on that team last time. But last year, Ethan had what I would say was quite a bounce back season. He didn't have a great 2022. His end on 100 Thieves was a bit unceremonious. That 100 Thieves roster got pretty close to winning a tournament in 2021, but then they fell short, and then they dropped Steel, who was the IGL at the time. Ethan took over, and the team didn't really have success with him as IGL. So when I look at Ethan's performance last year on Evil Geniuses, it was very good. He was playing quite well, quite consistently, but I also kind of see that as a symptom of him having less pressure than he did the year before. Not having to be the IGL with Busio taking over that service, I do think it definitely helped Ethan. So while I don't think this is a bad pick as IGL by any stretch of the imagination, I do think that it is a bit risky. Maybe they do something that's kind of like what Exit was doing during the 2022 season, where they had two players IGLing, one for each attack and defense side. Maybe they can do something like that with Ethan Marved. I don't think that's what they go with. It does seem like Ethan, he did tweet out today that he's going to be the IGL. So again, it's not a bad choice, but in my view, I don't see Ethan as a top 10 IGL in the VCT. I think there are definitely, there's worse IGLs to have. I don't think he's going to be bad at the job. This team is going to perform well, I do think so. But are they going to win an international championship without an IGL like FNS or Boostio or Sadak or any other player that is seen as an elite IGL? I don't really know. Now we're going to talk about the stats of each of these players during the 2023 VCT season. We're going to talk about the roles that they played on those teams as well, and see if we can kind of get a good idea of how this team is going to be built and what the compositions are going to be like. Starting with the man that nearly single-handedly saved Evil Genius's season last year, Demon1. He had 1,248 kills, 1,001 deaths, 256 assists for a KD ratio of 1.24. He played Jet, Brim, Killjoy, Chamber, and Astra. He mainly stuck to the Jet role. He did play Brim on, I believe it was just one map. He was consistently a Brimstone player. Believe it might have been Fracture. Could be wrong on that. You can fact check me if you want. And I do think Demon1 is a very talented player. I think this is a great pickup. He was probably sought after by a lot of teams. NRG being the one that he chooses should be beneficial to NRG, but I do have concerns when it comes to Demon1. And it's not even just about him as a player. I do think he's extremely talented. He has fantastic aim. He has great competitive spirit. He's an absolute fighter, and he's pretty versatile when it comes to the roles that he can play. He's shown that he's able to be elite on Brimstone. I don't know how much he played Astra last year. I believe it was just in one tournament, so it might have just been 1 or 2 maps here and there. But hey, being able to at least fill a smokes role if it's needed, that is a beneficial thing. But we have seen at almost every year of professional LAN Valorant, players can be considered the best in the world, and then the next season, they can just fall apart. Many people believed at the end of the season that Demon1 is the best player in Valorant right now, and that very well might be true. But we've seen TenZ, Nats, Yay, all of these players be considered the best in the world, at least for a time during their season, and then the next season they just don't perform as well. Yay being the most, I guess, egregious example of that. He was absolutely insane during the 2022 season. Granted, Cloud9 did do him dirty. Would he have had a much better season if he was playing in Tier 1 instead of playing for Disguised? Probably, but at the same time, the level that he was playing at in 2022 wasn't even close to what he was playing in 2023. And again, his confidence was shot. He was done dirty by an org. Would things have been different? Probably. But does he have a season like he did in 2022 in 2023 if, say, he joined the NRG roster? I don't know. I don't know if I can fully believe that, and especially with Chamber not being as meta in the 2023 season versus where he was at in 2022. So I don't like to use that argument. That is just because a character isn't as good, but it does affect a player's level of play. And with Demon1, can he break that cycle of being known as one of, if not the best player in the world, and then following it up with a very good next season? I think he can. We've seen that with Aspas too. I think many people think Aspas is the best in the world. He's won a world championship. He's gone to a couple grand finals. He is very consistently good, and that may be my pick for best player in the world because of how consistent he's been. But in terms of TenZ, when he had a very strong 2021, followed up with a really bad 2022 and 2023. I think this is kind of his last year to really prove he's an elite player. And I brought up Nats earlier. Nats, I wouldn't use him as too bad of an example. He is still very solid at the end of 2021, where he won Masters Berlin with Gambit, and then he went to the grand finals of Champs that year. His 2022 season was not even close to up to par, but there were other reasons that were affecting the Gambit roster that were kind of out of their control. And Nats did have a good season on Liquid last year, but at the same time, Nats is no longer in that conversation for best player in the world. Granted, he was considered that very early on in the game's lifespan, at least competitively, so it maybe didn't matter as much, but I do think there's a lot to be said about the best player in the world, at least players that are considered around that tier, dropping off their next season. I really hope that doesn't happen to Demon1, but it is possible. We've seen it a couple times now. Anyways, moving on from Demon1, we have Ethan, who I was talking about previously, so I won't spend too much time on him. Ethan last year on Evil Geniuses, he had 1,105 kills, 1,089 deaths, 911 assists for a KD ratio of 1.01. He played Breach, Sky, KO, and Yoru. I saw a comment on my last video about NRG saying that if Ethan does join the team, they're going to have role issues, and I do understand why that commenter said that. Just briefly going down to Victor and crashies, you see that they did play similar characters, especially crashies being very good on the initiator role, and Ethan mainly playing the initiator role on Evil Geniuses. Again, I do feel like the freedom that he had without being the IGL did allow for Ethan to perform better. So now that crashies is going to kind of take over as that main initiator, it is fine because you can have two initiator players and have success. That is a comp that is pretty common. But at the same time, I do think Ethan maybe not being as flexible of a player as other players potentially might be. It is something that I do see as a concern, but overall Ethan did perform well. I think he can follow it up. Moving on to Marved. Now, he played a lot less maps than everybody, so his numbers are a lot smaller, but playing on Sentinels, he had 302 kills, 333 deaths, 154 assists, for a KD ratio of 0.9. He played Brimstone, Viper, Astra. You're not looking at Marved for a lot of kills. You're looking at Marved for that very, very solid smokes play. Marved was known as one of, if not the best smokes players in the world after the 2022 season, so I do think that joining his friends in Victor and crashies, reuniting those three players, I do think that's going to be a very good combo. Looking at the two other players that were on the NRG roster last year, we have Victor. He had 1,075 kills, 999 deaths, 419 assists for a KD ratio of 1.08. He played KO, Sky, Killjoy, but most notably he played Reza and Neon. Victor is a very, very effective flex player. He can play a lot of different roles. He's very good at fragging out, as you can see from his amount of kills and his KD ratio, but not just being very good on those two duelist roles in Reza and Neon. He can be very effective you as an initiator and as a sentinel with Killjoy. So Victor, I do think he's very consistent. He's one of, if not the best flex players in the world. He's at least up there. So I do think that he's going to continue to be a very effective player for this team. In my opinion, he was the best player on NRG last year. Some might say Artis, because Artis did have a lot of kills, but I feel like Artis was too inconsistent to be considered that. I do think Victor was just consistently their best player and was a player that they could always rely on. Now looking at crashies, he had 1,008 kills, 938 deaths, 576 assists for a KD ratio of 1.07. It's like 1.074, so it's very close to Victor's. It's just like a couple points off, so I ran it down. He played Sova, Killjoy, Sage, Sky, and Breach, so mainly initiator with two sentinels in there in Killjoy and Sage. He's very good as initiator, but he can also fill that sentinel role if it's needed. So that is where the confliction with Ethan can maybe come in, because you have Victor, who is flex, you have crashies, who is mainly that initiator role, but can also be very effective on sentinels. So with Ethan being mainly initiator, is that going to conflict? I think potentially yes. Ethan, he could be flexible and play different roles. I'm not sure what other roles he's played during other seasons, but I do think he was in his element, mainly playing initiator and not being the IGL on Evil Geniuses, so the pressure is going to be on him going back into that IGL role. And when you have a player in crashies that is already filling the role that you generally fill, again, you can have two initiators, but if you're not flexible with it as much as you can be, that is going to be a concern. Overall, when you look at this roster, this team is going to have no trouble getting kills. You have Demon 1 with 1,200, Ethan over 1,100, Victor 1,075, crashies 1,008, and Victor probably would have had more kills than Ethan overall if NRG went further into champions. Unfortunately, they didn't, but overall, they're going to be able to frag out. They're going to be able to get a lot of kills. That might be how they win games. They might just have to outkill and outfrag all of their problems. Because again, the structure of this team does leave something to be desired. You don't really have a player that is known as a star IGL, at least a very elite IGL, when you already kind of had that in FNS. He was mainly known for that. Ethan, again, he's a capable IGL, but is he going to be able to get to the level of Boostio last year, of FNS during 2022? I don't know if he's capable of that. I hope he is, but overall he might not need to be, because this team might be able to just frag out on every single match, on every single map, and they do have some very strong support pieces here, especially in Marved. Victor should follow up his very strong season with another, hopefully even stronger season. Demon 1, is he going to be at the same level as he was last year? I hope so, but I don't know if it's possible. I do expect maybe a drop in his kills and KD ratio just a little bit. I don't expect him to have this same kind of season, but if he can at least get close, that would be a success for NRG. crashies should also still be consistently very good, and mainly we're just hoping for the chemistry of these players to just mesh well and to be able to win a world championship, because just based off of talent alone, they should be able to. They should be at least top 3 in Americas. Sentinels is looking really good, but I do think just based off of pure talent, I do think NRG definitely beats them in that regard. Not based off of structure, just pure talent, pure just being able to just frag out and take over maps. I think NRG has more players capable of doing that than Sentinels do. Cloud9's roster is leaving a lot to be desired, in my opinion at least. They did go for a more budget roster. 100 Thieves is probably getting Boostio, which should absolutely help, but looking at the rest of the roster, I'm not too excited about it. So overall, at least compared to the other North American teams, this team should absolutely be better than most of them. Do they end up being better than all the other teams in the Americas though? Because you got to look out for those Brazilian teams, you got to look out for those Latin American teams. Leviathan, they should be fantastic this year. Furia, I don't know. Loud, they lose ass pass, but they should still be a dominant force in the Americas. So is NRG going to be able to overcome all that? I think it's possible. I do think this roster should be better than the one last year, but it's mainly just the roles in the IGL, and that is my main concern about them. But they do have enough talent to overcome that, so I do think that's what Chet and the management team at NRG is betting on, and I think it's a decently safe bet to make. Chet probably already knows how this team is going to play. This team could play more of a W Gaming Paper X kind of style where they just go, get frags, kill, plant, just all this stuff. Instead of playing a bit slower and more reserved, they might have to play like that with the talent that they have, and I do think that that could be very effective. It almost won Paper X a championship, so maybe it can work for NRG. I do think this roster should be better than last year, and I really hope they win a world championship. I think they have the tools to do it, but we'll see if it all fits together. I will be doing a full season preview of every team in the VCT, and we will be talking about this roster again, and in that video I'll go a bit more in depth on the maps that NRG was good on and bad on last year, and a bit more of a deeper dive into the team. But for now, I just wanted to look at just the roles, the stats, and just what we can see from this team at face value. But look forward to those season previews, which will be a bit more in depth. Anyways, thank you guys very much for watching. Let me know in the comments below, do you think this NRG roster is capable of winning a world championship? Are they going to be better than last year? Are they going to be able to win a Champions, a Masters? Are they going to be first in Americas even? So let me know what you guys think. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.